What is up, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Austin Jardine, and this is the Vanguard Project. Happy freaking Monday. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend. To kick today off, I just want to let y'all know that I really appreciate you for the ratings and reviews. You're all awesome. The feedback I've gotten to help push forward, I appreciate it. If you haven't yet, please take a quick second to leave a rating and review. It really does help grow the show, gets us out there a little bit more, and really does too give me the warm and fuzzies. Also, please drop by the website vanguardstories.com to pick up some swag. We've got some shirts and all sorts of other stuff out there printing. We've got shirts on premium and next level branded shirts that turned out phenomenally. Like I said, that's vanguardstories.com, and I would love for you to go pick up some swag and tag me on the Instagram, just the Vanguard Project with periods in between. Yeah, I'm super happy about how the shirts are turning out. So please go pick some up and follow us. Tag me. Let's see if we can continue to grow the podcast, the community, and see how this thing turns out. But as a refresher, for those of you maybe coming into this podcast new or forget what this shenanigans all about is, my goal with the podcast is best summed up as growth through story, strength through community. And what I mean by that is I want folks to share their stories in a way that relates to you, hopefully to give you some insights or different ways of thinking about your own life, potentially finding a new passion, a new way forward, or potentially a community to join in on. So, my style truly revolves around active listening, where I do my best not to command the conversation, but really let the interviewee tell their story and share their life experiences. So, that's my goal, really to share their stories and give you all some good tidbits to chew on. And with all that being said, today's episode is brought to you by Black Rifle Coffee. I am a big Black Rifle fan for honestly a number of reasons. The people are awesome. I've been really fortunate to have interacted with a handful of folks, and they are just amazing people, but they make phenomenal coffee. Actually, as I'm editing this episode, it's a Sunday afternoon for me, or Sunday morning. I've not slept well this week. It's been super weird, but I'm sipping on some Flying Elk coffee, and honestly, I think that this is, at least right now, my favorite. It is not too sweet, not too bitter, kind of just has the right amount of caffeine, goes down easy. Yeah, I love it. It's a great tasting coffee. And if you feel the need to pick up some for yourself, whether that's a single bag, maybe some ready to drink servings, or the instant coffees, that's another one of my favorites. Is their little steep bags. They're like little square packets that are coffee ready to go. So like if you're out hunting, hiking, camping, whatever the case may be, and you want a good gut punch of caffeine, you just throw it in some hot water, let it steep, and those things also taste really good. Hit up Black Rifle's website, use code Vanguard for 20% off, which is nuts, and that also includes subscriptions. So if you are an obsessive coffee drinker like me, I think I go at least through 2 pots a day. Just use code Vanguard, get 20% off, including their subscriptions. Black Rifle's website, like I said, just code Vanguard, 20%. But without further ado, I'm gonna stop chatting and we're gonna talk to Mr. Dan. He's a big marketing and creative guy, so I'm really excited to chat and get to know him. So I'm gonna stop rambling and I'm gonna keep drinking this coffee because now I've got cotton mouth. But let's roll it. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the Vanguard Project. For those of you new to the show, my name's Austin Jardine, and I'm just a dude outside of Boise, Idaho. I've learned to talk to people, and I've learned that I really enjoy talking to people and getting their stories, learning about who they are, where they come from, what they've done to get to where they're at. And my hope with this podcast and talking to these folks is that you learn something new, maybe get excited about something, learn a new skill set, or some way to get involved with whatever it is that you are most excited about. And I've had a few cups of coffee today, as Dan and I were talking about, and it's Friday, at least we're recording, so I'm ready for the weekend. But Dan, I appreciate you hopping on, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. As you know, we're rolling up to SHOT Show, and things are complicated. It's with the pandemic and the legitimate risk of closing down our factories if we bring people back from SHOT Show. So, one of the brands that I work for is going with a skeleton crew, and the other has pulled out, but they've sent, sales reps and executives just to handle, meetings, which I think is, the right choice. In fact, I've heard today that in the main hall for SHOT, there's 140 people or 140 vendors that are going to be no shows.
Yeah.
So it's it's not just us, and we do want to make sure the NSSF survives and that SHOT Show survives, because we do see its value, but we gotta protect our business interest also.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I know, I'm relatively aware of the brands that you work with and kind of what it is that you do. Do you mind just kind of introducing yourself a little bit more, and then kind of maybe the relationship to SHOT Show that you were just mentioning, or how that plays into your life now?
Yeah, totally. So I work for two brands that are fairly popular within the firearms industry. One is Vertx, that's Vertx. They manufacture, low visibility apparel and products. For we sell things to the government, we sell things to the prepared professional, the civilian end user, as some people would call them. And then the other one is a firearms manufacturer based out of Centralia, Washington, called ZEV Technologies. ZEV's been in the market, for over a decade, manufacturing, starting with triggers. That was their main thing. It was founded by a guy named Al Wolf, who's super cool. It was originally based in California. They acquired Mega Arms, which some people will probably be familiar with. And they moved up there. We've done a lot of work with the company, and now we make a bunch of cool stuff like AR-15s. We manufacture our own handgun called the OZ9, and we've got a bunch of different variants of that. So those are the brands, and this is the week for SHOT Show, which those brands would normally be attending if the world hadn't gone mad.
Yep. I've definitely oogled over several ZEV firearms over the years.
Yeah, it's been fun, man. I work for another firearms manufacturer, kind of as a marketing officer, but it's such a tiny company. Doesn't really count. That company was called Landtac. That was my first experience at a firearms manufacturer. I haven't actually worked for a firearms vendor up until about 3 years ago. I'd always kind of been in the apparel and tactical accessory space. So I worked for another manufacturer called High Threat Concealment, who's no longer with us. God rest their souls. And that's kind of where I learned the equipment and low visibility side, which kind of led me into working for Vertx.
Okay. So did you grow up, and I know that we talked about this a little bit before we hit record, and this is kind of where I think it's going to be a lot of fun diving into it, but did you grow up in kind of the outdoor firearms tactical industry, or was that something that slowly formed into life now?
I didn't. I grew up as a skateboarding and BMX riding, punk rock and hardcore kid. And I think my first experience, I mean, my father owned guns. We had guns and we shot guns, when I was younger. It just wasn't ever like a huge passion. And my first foray into firearms was not like, man, I want a gun. This is cool. I got a gun stuck in my face. That was my introduction to like firearms. I got robbed over $1.55. A guy was looking into my like cheap piece of junk Ford in the apartment complex I lived in, and I walked up, not very smart, and just was like, "Hey, man," and that was his answer to "Hey, man," was the business end of what I think was like a Glock 19, and I made a conscious decision to immediately save up cash, not having necessarily the resources, but I was like, that can't happen again. So that's how I ended up purchasing like one of my first guns.
Interesting. So in that moment, so I've never been on the business end of a gun, right? I mean, I've been around guns. I've been on the trigger end of it. How did you take that experience and turn it into, I guess, a positive, more or less?
It just really kind of, I guess, man, I hadn't really experienced anything like that. Like most people are going to go through their life and never experience anything like that. And I don't know necessarily, I mean, I guess in the end things worked out.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that, like, I'm not a talisman kind of guy. I never have. I try to be extremely grounded. And I knew you always run across guys when you're younger that have guns, that are into guns, and they wave them around and they act tough. And that's never what I wanted to be, or viewed as. So I went out and I purchased a Glock 26 was my first handgun, and I went and got a concealed carry permit, and I learned how to carry it properly in a holster. I took some kind of what I would describe as FUD training classes, but this is over 20 years ago, and they'll get you by.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to learn how to be a professional. I wanted to learn how to, like, be responsible, and be responsible if I ever had to use it. Like, I understood. I'm like, man, these guys, I think they're going to get into a gunfight in a parking lot because some guy tried to rob them, and everything's going to be hunky dory afterwards. It's like, not necessarily, man. So I just didn't want to end up on the wrong side of the law.
Sure.
So
was violence or gun violence pretty commonplace growing up for you, or?
I live in in or about Norfolk, Virginia.
Okay.
And it's a little like the Wild Wild West out here, man. It's there's a lot of gang violence, there's a lot of gun violence. That doesn't, as the citizenry, that has to live within that. I don't think that those people being disarmed, would make there be any less gun violence. We just can't be soft targets.
Sure.
Right. So yeah, I certainly grew up with it and around it.
Okay. So growing up in and around it then, and kind of purchasing your first firearm, how did you start to translate that into, I guess, daily life and potentially, down the path of turning it into a career? I mean, did you want to be in the firearms industry or the marketing side of things growing up, or how did that
it just kind of happened? I think, like, my love for firearms kind of developed over time. So I started, as we talked about before we started recording, I worked at a Harley Davidson dealership. I went to MMI in Florida. I learned how to work on motorcycles because that was kind of becoming, like, my passion. I worked in a custom shop that was attached to, a Harley dealership here locally. And you get to see a lot of wild things. Not all of them are, on the right side of the law, but you get an appreciation for it. And, I'm not out there. I'm just riding my bike and skateboarding and going to shows, and just trying to have fun, where, these dudes are doing what they do and you're just privy to it. That's about it. But you get to, later on, as my kind of passion for firearms developed, I had an opportunity to be a partner at a local gun shop for a little while. And that's kind of really where it started. I was working on motorcycles and then working on cars and then part-time working at this shop. And the grind, the 9 to 5 like grind, that is, like, when you do hourly piecework, like how they pay car mechanics and motorcycle mechanics. That's a tough on the body. It's tough on the mind. You don't get paid a lot, and if you want to live a successful life, I mean, you really got to throw yourself into it. And those guys, they die early, man, because they're so stressed out and beat to death. It's tough to live, work till you're 65 doing that type of work. So I knew I had to get out, and randomly a buddy of mine came in, and we were talking about another friend of mine come in for, like, a state inspection, and we had gotten to kind of shooting the shit. And I realized he was working for High Threat Concealment, which is a company that I've been looking at, watching videos of them at SHOT Show, and was getting ready to order a holster from these guys. So I ended up, by then I was kind of starting to work at this gun shop. I ended up going up there with some of our samples, just being like, hey, this is what we do. It'd be cool to have a partner in town.
Yeah.
And I ended up, leaving the cars behind, leaving the gun shop behind, throwing in a year and a half there, which is some great experience, some great training. Some of those guys are, good dudes. Some of them, ended up not being all that great. But in the end, it positioned me to kind of be, well, I just end up, I'm reading about ballistics, ballistic coefficients. I'm reading about every type of gun under the sun because they serviced all these weapons. They made equipment, anything that you can stick in a holster, they were making stuff for. Sure. So you really get to have a broad knowledge base about things like this. I kind of worked my way in from like production, like manufacturing holsters with them into their marketing department. Really started to learn about, Google Analytics and Google Business. And I kind of missed this, but like I was a photographer, just going to shows, shooting photos. So I knew my way around a camera, and they needed somebody to do, lifestyle photos to fill up their social media machine, to help them do product photography. So I kind of just worked my way in, and we got to a point with that company where they were just having some financial difficulties. Some people had just made some serious mistakes, and I no longer, the stress of it was no longer worth it. And through going to like some trade shows with them, I'd met some super cool people that worked at Vertx, and I was just like, hey, if you guys need any part-time help, here's a video I made. It was funny because we actually had a Vertx commuter sling, and a friend of mine, we stuck an MP5 in it, and we went around all over the Norfolk like transit system, like on buses, on trains, and I just made like a video of it, and I sent it to him, all edited, color graded. A friend of mine here locally makes music, so I'd like, gotten permission from him to use a track. And that video was like kind of the catalyst for me, to get hired at Vertx. Luckily, there were some people there who, saw something in me, because I don't have any formal education outside of going to MMI, right? Yeah. I have no college education. I don't have a marketing background. It's all hands-on experience. So I get to, these people are like, yeah, we want to hire you. We see something, people in the gun industry. You're not worried about talking to, influencers or, famous people within the gun industry. Because fame for me, I'm just unaffected. I'm just like, folks are folks, and I think that most people, even like people like Kyle Lamb, they just want to be talked to like normal people.
Everybody's a dude.
Some couple of the Benghazi 13 hours dudes, Chris Tano and Odie Boone are friends of mine. And I think that they certainly appreciate that I'm not starstruck. I'm just like, I get it. You guys, you've been through it, and that's cool, but we don't have to live every second, of every minute, like surrounded, by that event. Right. There's more to you than that. And I understand that. I think that, my ability to see that in people, has helped me greatly. And networking has become a skill set of mine. And it's not because I want to be the coolest guy in the room. I'm just happy to be there, and share some good moments with people.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I got into the pro staff management side of it, and, managing social media. And then, I started just, they didn't want the input, but I was giving Vertx the input on, products, man. And I have this saying, it's called modern tactical application, right? What we did 20, 30 years ago in the field isn't necessarily how we do them today, right? Things evolve, products evolve, weapon systems evolve. The days of the uniform, a soldier have evolved. So, key Vertx and this low visibility stuff. And, think back to 2015, rifles, every rifle was like 16, 18, 20 inches.
Massive.
And all of a sudden, those rifles start getting super, super small, all the way down to sometimes not usable barrel lengths, depending on what caliber, or not usable for much. So Mike Pettingill at Law Folder, he comes out with that thing, and that's like a game changer.
Yep.
Right. But it's a game changer for Vertx, because now guys want to shove folding rifles into our backpacks. And, the State Department comes to us and they're like, man, can you guys make one with a removable laptop sleeve? They're like, well, cool. So we just take all these DNA points. I'm talking to a guy over here, talking to a guy over here, and these are professionals. And I'm just taking all the information in, and you got to kind of lay everything out and figure out like what's just a personal want and what's repeatable and usable.
Right.
And so, through that, we've changed our bags. We continue to develop even our apparel. Our apparel is, shares a specific DNA for every piece that we come out with. And all of that is, developed, by way of knowledge passed to us from experience in the field.
Yep.
So,
okay, I've got a couple questions because there was some pretty interesting things coming out of that. So I'm going to go back just a little bit, if that's all right with you.
totally.
So I know, so you said that when you were leaving, and I'm going back, right? And I was taking notes kind of as we were talking, because I was like, dude, I'm not going to
interrupt. It's okay. I rambled on for a hot minute.
So. You're good. You're good. I love it because then it's fun. I don't know. I enjoy it. So when you left the motorcycle shop, okay, you said that you were kind of privy to a lot of bad stuff going on. Okay. I can only imagine, and I don't have firsthand experience with this, that it's easy to fall into kind of that trap of getting involved with the bad crowd, right? How were you able to avoid that and kind of say, hey, this isn't for me? And the reason I ask this question is if somebody's in a spot that they're like, dude, I'm kind of surrounded by, shit that I shouldn't be getting involved in, how do I think about getting out of it? If that makes sense.
I think that, when you're experiencing, so I'm not a drug guy, and I didn't drink for a long time. And I think that really, I like to hang out and socialize, but I'm also not. Now, you listen to this podcast, you'd be like, this dude's a talker, but I'm actually a pretty quiet dude in normal life. And, when you're a quiet person, people are not necessarily always inviting, I think that helped a lot. I think there were also guys within, I'm not going to name off the organization, but they knew that I wasn't this guy. They knew they could call me for specific things, but real bad guy shit wasn't ever going to be my MO. And they knew that. And I kind of told them that. I just kind of put my foot down, and I'm like, I come into this thing at like 17 years old,
Okay.
and then, I'm seeing a lot of it immediately, drug use, violence, anything that goes along with, biker stuff. And then you also experience it in hardcore, because a lot of hardcore kids, they're poor. They come from, broken homes, and they live in crappy apartments in bad neighborhoods, where gang violence and other, it's just a different type of gang violence. You got like hood gang violence as opposed to like, white biker gang violence.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like,
yep.
At the end of the day, it's all the same thing. For me, and I've definitely gotten in trouble. I'm not like a saint, but I quickly figured out, I was like, I don't like jail. I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to be poor forever. So, I just pulled myself up on my bootstraps and was like, okay, we have to figure out how to, like everything in my life has been figuring out how to monetize my situation.
Okay.
So I was like, I work at this Harley dealership. I need to figure out how to get out of the bike washing, lot rat nonsense, and like get into, like working on motorcycles. I need to because I was mechanically inclined. I worked at a bike shop when I was like a kid. So I knew how to kind of turn a wrench, but I didn't know how to do it professionally. So, boom, I figured out how to monetize that. And then once the motorcycle thing kind of ran its course, I just wanted to get away. I just got into working on cars. I just had to buy unfortunately, Harley Davidson stuff's all metric. So I had to buy a bunch of, or it's all standard. So I had to buy a bunch of metric crap, to work on cars, and that's just a whole different, ball of frustrating. It's, figuring out how to make the best of those situations. And I like to use this term shadow governor. I don't know if you ever heard that before, but amongst every job, there's always a guy. And I saw this on OF Nation a few years ago, and I'd never seen anybody really put it into words, but there's this always guy that's, whether he's in a platoon, a unit, he's in your vertical, it's your job. That's the guy, he's not the manager, but he's like the shadow governor. He's kind of like
shot caller.
Shot caller. If a hate train needs to get started because y'all got to get somebody out of there, he's usually the guy to do it. I figured out, I was like, I just need to be this dude at every job. I don't necessarily need to be in control, but I need to be able to sway, I don't know, what's going on around me in my favor,
Right.
and I've read some Harvard, this is going to go super geeky here for a second, but Harvard, business mags, a lot of good information. And they pointed me to a book, and I cannot remember it now off the top of my head, but it's about practicing likability,
Hmm.
which phrased incorrectly could be, sounded off as manipulation,
Sure. Social
but
engineering.
social engineering. And I'm not saying you got to go out there and maliciously social engineer, everything, because that's ridiculous. But if you see, a group of people that are very resistant and you're stuck with them, well, you've got to do something to improve your situation, right? So, figuring out how to be likable to these folks. And just because you're practicing likability doesn't mean it's negative or it's malicious. I mean, it could be as simple as, doing somebody a solid, willing to give a helping hand. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So think of it more in that context. And my situation started to improve greatly. And I don't want to take us too far down the rails, but a friend of mine, I don't know if you ever heard of Cogworks or not, but
Hmm. I've heard of them. Yeah.
yeah, Garrett is a super good friend of mine, super, super smart guy. And we just talked about giving. And he's like, dude, I just try to give. And he was like, as long as I'm giving to people, whether it's small or it's big, I don't know if I'm just lucky, but it always seems to come back 100-fold, not even 10-fold. I mean, my life is charmed, at this point for all that I've been through. So, I think like the giving part of likability, is where like a lot of people, will find their success because, folks, when things aren't going good, it becomes the victim mentality really fast.
Yeah.
They get on social media, they start venting, it's the vitriol, this negative commentary. Everybody sees that, man. And, I'm not saying, don't ever like lash out or don't ever have an opposing opinion, but, emotional intelligence, plays a huge part in whether people are willing to work with you or not.
Interesting. Okay. So it's funny because moons ago, I don't even know how long ago, I definitely looked at the social engineering type of things, right? But I haven't heard it described in terms of likability, right? Which I think makes sense. And I think that you could certainly take it negatively. But I also think that in terms of doing a solid, right, building the relationship aspect of it, I think is probably the more helpful way to look at it. In your, I guess, study, experience, and practice of that, what have you learned that has been the most helpful or maybe the best resource people could be like, dude, maybe I suck at being likable to go look at?
I always, temper and timing are, because people say crazy things all day long, or they say things that are just not realistic or, manageable. And, for a lot of folks that produces, if they've got a temper, that produces a reaction that's not necessarily good and shouldn't be on public display. It's like
Yeah.
we always like, oh man, that dude's got an opinion, but he really shouldn't talk about it. It's that type of thing, man. And so, some of my friends, I'm not like a coach or anything like that, but buddies of mine, be like, what would you do here? And I'd be like, I don't have an advice because I don't, for their exact situation. But what I like to tell people is when somebody, says something to you that isn't wise or isn't, right off the bat isn't going to work, hear them out. I like to compartmentalize my emotions, meaning if somebody says something that's just like kind of unprofessional, or you're just like, man, they're just not really hearing you, fine. You I practice a level of stoicism
Hmm.
also. And part of that is compartmentalizing your emotions. You feel something every time somebody says something to you, every interaction you have with another human being, you feel something, right? So you just box all that up, put it away, go, okay, man, I hear you. Gotcha. Let me get back to you. And that allows you to, not only process what they've said and take it for what it is, right? Because if it's just text or an email, there's little to no inflection in text, right?
Right.
But if it's spoken word, you hear how it's coming out of their mouth. And if it's not coming out good, Okay, that requires a lot more management. In an email, you can just reply to somebody. You got to rewrite your emails 3 times. If you're not doing that, you're screwing up. You never fire out the first version of an email because, like my boss at ZEV, I'm very direct. And, my boss is like, dude, you're super direct. And I don't have an issue with that. But some people, they need more care. And that's true. They
Yep.
do. And that's not a slight on them. Some people are affected more by how you speak to them than others.
Hmm.
Right? You can say whatever, nasty shit you want to me, and I'm just like, okay, man, cool, But some people can't or don't want to be talked to in any sort of direct fashion. So you got to put the kid gloves on, and that's fine. That's life. If you're expecting everybody around you, to just go at them like you're a hammer and they're a nail, it's not going to work out for you. Being able to read the room is part of the equation. And then the other part is when the room speaks back, take some time.
Yeah.
There's nothing in the rule book that says you got to reply right this second.
Right. So that's a pretty, I guess, like introspective thing to be aware of, right? To be able to do that and say, hey, I know this about myself. I know this about the people I'm around. How long did it take for you to develop that and maybe kind of hone in on those skills?
It took me my whole life.
Okay.
It really became an aha moment about 5 or 6 years ago. And it took me, quite a while to polish it, because when you come from places like where, like in a garage, those dudes are maniacs. They're under high stress. They're scratching, for every dollar they get, every minute of the day. It's tough, and they're upset. And it's easy, like that type of behavior, that type of emotional strain is contagious.
Yeah.
And it's easy to fall into that. And, I experienced it at pretty much every job I ever worked at, and I'm sure you've experienced it in everywhere, but in an office setting where people are like, the cube farm,
Yep.
where people are like really quiet and they just wear their headphones and they just stress out to themselves. So, 5 or 6 years ago, I started working at Vertx, and they have a very professional, office etiquette. And my wild ass, like cursing and, just general ruckus, because a buddy of mine that worked there too was like a second bat ranger. So he was just hell on wheels. Also, we were like oil and water at a trade show, and I come back and my, my direct report, man, and she's like shaking her head. She loves my work, right? But she didn't love me. She's like, dude, you suck. As like a professional, you suck. And she was much nicer about it, because that's how she is. But it took me, it meant something. It was like being talked to by my mom, and I think it took her type of personality to be like, dude, because when your mom says it to you, you're like, whatever.
Yeah.
But like, I'm over 30 years old, and I've got a woman who's just a couple years older than me telling me that I suck. Because
and you're like, okay, that hurts different.
you're like, that hurt. Yeah, it hurt different, dude. And it forced me into a corner. And, I had to be better. I was like, I'm comfortable with where I'm at, financially. And now I have a good job that I like. I'm not waking up at, 6 in the morning and like getting out in the cold or the extreme heat and like forcing myself to like work super hard. I'm setting myself up for success, right? And we want this to continue. We want it to expand. So you have to expand. You've got to read books. You've got to calm down. You've got to figure out a different way to process information and respond.
Yeah. Yeah. So in that same vein, right, you said that you have no formal education as far as, I know that you talked about your Google Analytics and the marketing and the photography and everything. Where did all of that skill come from?
Smarter people than me. And I hate the cliche saying of, if you're in a room, and you've got it all figured out, you need to go to the next room. Well, as dumb as it sounds, it's absolutely true. If you're not trying to listen to people who are smarter than you and being purpose driven about being in rooms with people that know more, have more experience, and are smarter than you, I'm not saying you're going to fail, but you're going to be stagnant.
That's my favorite quote. If you find yourself the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've been super fortunate because, a lot of the people that work at Vertx have master's degrees, and a lot of the guys at ZEV have MBAs. And so for the past 3 or 4 years, I've been privy to conversations, where I've just learned a lot from these folks. They've taught me everything from numbers, how to react, how to get to the goal line, and these companies, they don't care how you really get to the goal line as long as you don't kill somebody or, end up in jail in the process.
Right.
It's business is pretty wide open in this country. It's about, relationship building, how they talk to each other, the type of language that they use. That stuff really counts. One of the things, I'm really bad at writing emails, right? And that's why I say you got to write an email 3 times. I would send an email that was like slightly emotional and, again, no inflection, right? So they read the email back. And I remember seeing this Bill Burr clip where he's, he asked the dude, about consent in the crowd. And the guy's like, consent. He's like, see, that's not what I said. That shit came into your ear, got all mixed up with your childhood, and then you just, whatever came out, that's not what I meant. Well, that was what was happening to me, except these people are, I don't necessarily if they're smarter, but they have more experience and they have an actual background in this. So like, I keep getting, so I'm like, dude, I gotta pay more attention to what I'm saying and how it's going to be read and interpreted. Right. In order to attain the response that you're looking for, you got to make it interpretable. Otherwise, they might get the wrong idea.
So when you start sending these emails, just in this hypothetical example, right? How do you go about doing it in terms of building the relationship to understand? I guess, how do you develop the mindset to understand how it's going to be interpreted given a particular individual?
It depends on if you've like spoken to them or not, right? Is you can kind of measure the approach because you've got an idea if you've spoken to them face to face,
Sure.
and like you and I'm like, okay, I know this dude's going to be easygoing, so I can use terms like, hey, bro. I can be like, hey, man, what's good? The language can soften, but until you get, to that point of the relationship, like just be on your best behavior.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to like over sugar anything, but being professional and minding what you're saying and minding, the tone. Look, a great tool out there, and I don't use it for tone and inflection, but like Grammarly. Have you ever used Grammarly, like in your browser?
I think in passing, not in any real way.
It's a software tool that runs passively in the background of like Google, and I think like a lot of people could take advantage of things. So I'll relate this to phones, right? We've got a problem. We all know that. We're seeing how many screens we can get between us and the wall at most times, and with text messaging, social media, the Urban Dictionary, there's it's, people don't know how to spell anymore. They don't know how to talk. There's a lot of challenges coming up for folks, even people. I'm 40 years old and I know other 40-year-old dudes who, they're like painful to listen to. You're like, oh God, man, I just want to plug my ears. You sound awful. And, because I demand more from the folks that I know. So what I'm saying is a tool, if you suck, like figure out a way to get better. There's tools, man. They make a tool for everything now. So like Grammarly is great because, it not only fixes all your punctuation bullshit, but then, if your sentences are confusing, meaning they're hard to interpret, or it can pick up, this thing can pick up tone. That's
Really?
what's wild.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
dude,
weird.
it can pick up tone. So it's like, you want your emails to be uplifting, not like uplifting and inspirational, but you're trying to sell yourself. You're trying
Right.
to sell a point. You're trying to sell something to them. And in every conversation, you know, in a business, whether it's internal or external, meaning you're talking to a customer, you're talking to somebody else, meaning a boss to an employee, there's a sale going on, right?
Yeah.
You know, and somebody is going to be the buyer or not. And so it would do yourself a solid, you know, to figure out how to say it in the best way possible. So tools like Grammarly, when, you know, they allow you to set the tone, you know, I mean, those tone parts are like a paid service, but in, you know, if you use it for several months and it teaches you how to be better,
Yeah.
it sounds like a win, right?
That's interesting. I would never have thought that technology could help you with tone. Like I knew it could help, excuse me, obviously with grammar, spelling, confusing sentence structure, but like the feel goods, I would never have thought about that.
It's all in the vein of likability, right?
Yeah.
The more liked you are at a company, the more they're going to feel like you're a team player. And the more you're going to feel like you're a team player, which is in turn going to make you want to be more productive. It's going to make you want to be more successful. So it seems anything that you can, you know, and you got to like scratch and bite and want this shit. It's not just going to happen, you know, especially if you end every day with negative thoughts. Man, today was a loss. You know, I don't have many days where I'm like, this day sucked, you know. I was like, I try and always like turn some part of that day around. If the business part sucked, you know, we'll make the physical activity, you know, or, you know, like my relationship with my girlfriend. It is something you got to end on a positive note.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Don't go to sleep mad. That's just bad practice.
It's like when you play Call of Duty, you can't end on an L. You got to finish.
Dude, stop playing video games. Turn that shit off. Go to the gym, get on a bicycle, read a fucking book. Turn those fucking video games off, man. I quit playing video games 6 years ago, dude. And I know people that play it and can, you know, be productive. But for the most part, a lot of folks cannot. It's addictive, right? It's like looking at Instagram or looking at your phone, dude. And you should be doing the same thing with your phone. You should be looking at screen time on your phone. It's another tool. It's fucking free, man.
Yeah.
They're trying to make you better. They're like, get off this thing, or at least, you know, pay attention to what you're doing on it. You know, if you're spending 6 hours a day on social media and it's not your job, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
You're fucking up. You're losing ground on your career or your relationship or whatever.
Yeah. You're bringing up a good point. And I think that, so I know like my audience, right, is kind of the, you know, 20 to 40 variety, right? How did you develop that discipline, right, to stay off your phone and stop playing video games, right? Because I think that you could probably preach to me a little bit because I know that I like my video games, totally honest, but I also listen to a lot of books, go to the gym, yada, 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 right? How did you develop the discipline to move on?
There's a balance, right? If you could balance your time, like if you're like, hey man, I'm going to play video games for an hour, everybody's got an hour to just, you know, kill. Everyone, you know, fine. If that's the hour and that's how you want to spend it, just remember you can't get it back. Now, I'm not the ultimate purveyor of greatly used time.
Balance.
You know, don't get me wrong. We're all a work in progress. You know, nobody here is perfect, right? So it took me to just go, because I was like a video game nerd for like a little bit. You know, everybody gets into the Call of Duty bullshit. You're like, oh, it's cool, and you're kicking it with your buddies online. I think a natural just change of interest. It just kind of happened. I was like, and I think the more complicated it got, I think the older that I got,
the less fun it was.
the less fun it got to be. And I'm like, man, I would just rather be doing other shit. And I also have just like a love for bicycles. Like I'm a bicycle dork. And so, you know, my neighbor is like a semi-pro. I rode mountain bikes and BMX bikes, but I hadn't really been on a bike in about 10 years other than like, you know, just riding around the neighborhood. And he was like, dude, you have a skill set to do this. You should get involved. And so, you know, I think finding physical, because I like going to the gym, even though I'm chubby. I do like going to the gym. I like physical activity. I like face-to-face interaction. And I like good conversation over whatever's happening on the internet, which is a lot of toxic nonsense. It's social media, it's like being connected without actually being connected. You're like in a room full of no one.
Yep.
And I think that I started to just feel that, and it just made me want to get away.
Yeah.
I don't socialize with a ton of people. I keep about like 7 people that I talk to, every day. Getting away from the screen time, whether it's, it's about going, you gotta be honest with yourself, which I think a lot of people aren't. They're like, are you eating like shit? Yeah. Okay, well, stop it. It's easier said than done. It's going to take some willpower, right? The same thing with video games, same thing with screen time. Reading books, it sucks. It's not like it sucks because, it's just not a convenient format, right? This is so much easier.
It's man.
But there's something classic about it that, you can read a book. Like you don't have to be like a super smart person to like read a book and think about other things, or while you're reading that book, process that information and try to figure out how to apply it, or take some notes. Use your phone for something good. It's a tool. Take a note.
Yep.
So
I sympathize with a lot of those things, right? Reading sucks. I can't sit still for very long. And it's funny too, because like thinking about being in a room of nobody, right? That's what social media is, right? Is you're sitting on your phone, you're being surrounded by next to nothing productive, right? And it's kind of funny too, because like, I work from home. Excuse me, I work from home, kind of like what I was telling you, right? So like my interaction, 99% of my interactions anymore are virtual. And it's just kind of, I don't know where I'm going with that, but it's just kind of funny. Like when I do my interviews for the podcast, right? It's kind of funny because it's stemming through social media, right? Like I reached out to you through Instagram, right? But then like it's turning into this something that again is adding to more of my screen time, but still being semi-productive. Like I'm learning from this conversation. So it's just kind of funny how like that type of balance for me is coming into play. And I'm kind of thinking about what you're saying and trying to apply it to myself right now. So
yeah, again, regardless of, who you are in this day and age, we all kind of have the same tools, right? Yeah. At our, whether they're software tools or they're, it's a hardware tool like a phone, or, everything down to a gun. It's how you apply, like everything, man. I hate to go back to that moderation thing, but it's, we're forced into this world where, I work from home too, right? Both of my companies, I live in, around Norfolk, Virginia, and ZEV is about an hour and a half away from Seattle. Right. So, luckily I live in this day and age where I'm afforded the luxury, which I'm grateful for, to get on a screen and talk to my coworkers and work things out. Mm-hmm. That's a positive. But at the end of the day, if I have a ton of screen time, I'm also starving for face-to-face interaction.
Yep.
It's like if I went all day on my computer just working and not having to be on a screen, at the end of the day, I'm fine with just being quiet.
Yeah.
Right. But I think like this type of interaction, although it's good or can be good, it's also, it wears on you.
Yeah.
I don't think that's, the brain, it's processing that there's a person on the other end, but not a person in front of them.
Yeah.
So yeah. I think for a mental health aspect, we are a tribalistic species, and the further we go, down the rabbit hole of, digital communication, the worse it's going to get.
Yeah. It's funny because like when I hang up for the day, so my wife works weekend nights, right? And so it's kind of funny because when I log off for the day, like I'm annoying the hell out of her because I'm like, hey, I haven't talked to anybody all day. Hey, how's it going? What's up? And she's like, Jesus Christ, like, leave me alone.
I do the same thing to my girlfriend because she works at like a granite shop, and we, she's not dealing with people like all the time because it's a small, like really high end place that only, kind of a higher tier customer goes in.
Sure.
But contractors, workers, she's got that face-to-face interaction. She kind of wants to come home and just sit on the couch for a few minutes and decompress, where I'm like, I've been bottled up all day, and I'm like ready to talk to somebody for real.
I feel that. My wife's a cop. And so when she gets home, she's like, I've dealt with shitheads and idiots all day. God. Like,
Yeah.
and then she's like, and then I come home to you and you're fucking annoying. So it's bad news.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough, you know.
All right, man. So now with your kind of career that you've morphed into, right? Kind of coming back onto task a little bit. You manage, like you said, some of the pro staffers, some of the marketing, the go to market, all of that types of things, which to a guy like me kind of sounds like the dream job, right? Like you're kind of doing a lot of fun stuff, meeting a lot of cool people, doing a lot of fun things. How did you kind of take your career in that direction, and what do you feel like helped you most morphing into what you're doing now?
So when I got to Vertex, they had already stood up um, a version of a pro staff program. You know, they just hadn't quite figured out, um, you know, that the players they had at the time, you know, and we still have plenty of, you know, long-term tenure influencers. So don't take that as anything bad. And people that we work with, you know, that decide they want to go somewhere, you know, else and work with another brand, I do not fault them at all. I believe companies are more successful with symbiotic relationships, meaning, you know, both parties are getting something out of it and both parties are happy. You know, I'm all about organic content. I do not like shilly type stuff. Um, you know, I've got my network of people that we've developed over time, and it's worked out for us, you know, better than ever expected. It's a huge part of the brand awareness campaign for Vertex. And I think my, you know, just kind of regular guy approach has just made a lot of people very comfortable with our brand. I don't make demands. You know, I'm like, I'm going to send you this. You're going to post it. Eek. How cringy is
Yeah.
that type of behavior, you know? And same thing otherwise, man. I don't believe that there are, okay, this is a caveat. There are bad influencers. I don't want to say that though, because what I feel like is people have shit going on in their lives, right? They've all been through stuff. And some influencers, they're just naturals, right? And they become self-aware and they're like, man, I could like use this to my advantage, or I really like talking to people. Okay, awesome. Then there are influencers that are not self-aware, that have been through a lot, and they have weird ticks, where they really really need that like validation. And unfortunately, you know, they've got some growth.
Yeah.
They got some growing to do, and then that's just what it is. I mean, nobody is done growing. If you're done learning, you're an idiot, right? Like you're the dumbest dude in the room. So these people, like, they come up to me and they're like, you know, like little marketing agencies, one or two people, you know, they don't really have a vision, and they're like telling me I'm doing everything wrong. I'm like, wow, that's not what the numbers say, but fair enough. But again, I don't even reply at first. I'm just listening.
Yeah.
I think these, you know, so I just had a lot of success in the influencer, you know, setting up influencers. And here, I'll tell you this quick story. It's kind of cool. A friend of mine, Ian Strimbeck, he's Rune Nation LLC. He's a firearms instructor, former Marine, excellent dude, super smart, got a journalism degree. I had met Ian through a guy named John Bartolo. And basically Ian was going out, he got invited out to Loophole, like
Mm-hmm.
to their flat range, long range. And he was like, dude, I just brought him onto Vertex, you know, and he's like, you got to come out here. He's like, there's already going to be guys who are on Vertex out here. There's going to be some other potential players. There's a lot of good people going. You should come out here and meet everybody. And I'm like, that sounds super cool. And this is when Vertex didn't have like a budget. And granted, I'm 2 weeks in, right? I had gone to Boston with my boss for like a thing, like a little seminar thing with a piece of software we were using. And then this is week 2. And I'm like, hey, I need $1,000 plane ticket.
He's like, I'm spending money.
I'm like, I need $1,000 plane ticket. I got to go out here to this range event. I had never been to anything like this. And the guys at Loophole, Nick Kiltica, and some of the other cats, super good dudes. You know, Nick has been essential, you know, to the gun industry kind of blowing up. That dude's super solid. And anyway, so I got there, you know, I meet the T-Rex guys, the Cogworks guys, Milspec Mojo, Drew Estel from Bear Solutions, former, CAD guy, Mike, Mike Grand Thumb, Mike. I don't want to say his last name, but I almost having to have an edit. But all these folks are out. All these folks are out there, right? And I'm just like, well, cool. I'm here to like see if you guys want to help me blow this thing up. And I remember, the guy, Mike Bachelari, who's a very serious, like career sniper dude that, is like an optics instructor and probably a pivotal part for Loophole, but he's very stern and solemn. And he goes, your brand's just another 511. I don't give a shit. It's like kind of one of those things. And I'm like, ouch, because I've got everybody else, on board. And Mike later on came to me and he's like, dude, he's like, what you did, for Vertx, he's like, I honestly thought you guys were just another shit 511 type brand. And he was like, now, I see the type of people that are using the product. He's like, I've talked to it, I've used it myself, you did a good job.
Yeah.
And out of all the people that can blow up your ego and kind of give you a false positive on the work you do, coming from a guy like that, you're like, okay, you're going the right direction. It's easy to impress the mass. It's that
Sure.
one guy who's the critic, and he's not like a loud critic. He's just that guy. So that moment though, that weekend, I got to we stayed in an Airbnb. We shotguns, lasered things, played with nods. I mean, we just, drank, hung out, partied, whatever you want to call it. Developing those relationships, that was a catalyst moment for Vertx as a brand.
Yeah.
Because if you were paying attention in 2017 and 2018, we could do no wrong.
Yeah.
Anybody who was anybody was wearing our stuff, was running our gear, and it was just, we went from being this was the catalyst moment that gave us, it was like the keys to the brand awareness door, And I think when people are coming up and they're trying to figure out, how they're going to get their brand off the ground, have you ever read that book, Think and Grow Rich? It's a book from the 1930s. It was, Carnegie didn't write it, but he employed a guy to basically go around to all the super successful, wealthy people of the time. And, he's basically like, what is the key to all this? He's like, there's got to be something that makes all these people successful. They have to share something, right? So that guy went around and he asked everybody, and it turns out the key is opportunity and being able to see when a door is closing and then be on the lookout for the next one opening. It's like a guy today who doesn't know jack about anything, and he's working at, a shoe store. All of a sudden, he picks his interest in crypto is peaked, right? So he dives into the internet, starts learning and figuring it out. Then he starts saving up some cash and invests a few $100s. And then he ends up with $10, $100, $200,000, and all of a sudden he's wealthy, right? He saw that that's just a very vague example, but he was looking for an opportunity, and he wasn't seeing opportunity amongst his normal life. So he had to kind of create one. And that's what I did. I was like, I'm looking for the opportunity. I left High Threat and I was like, look, I'm glad, we got to work together. I'm glad you gave me an opportunity. I learned some things here. I might go to Vertx and this might be a shit show. Like I might be back. I was like, I didn't know it was going to work out. I didn't know what I was doing, but there was an opportunity presented to me and I had to jump through the door.
Yeah.
I think that makes a huge difference.
So when it comes to those opportunities, right? So finding and fishing for the opportunities, are you kind of actively telling people that you're engaging with, hey, I'm definitely open to things, or are you kind of doing it inside, right? And then keeping your hands in everybody's cookie jars? I guess, how are you finding, seeking, and making the most of those opportunities?
I'm just listening. People are always talking. But now, these days, people just understand that I'm open to work with other folks, right? Yeah. So a lot of the times before, in the beginning, I had to seek out opportunity. Whereas before, I feel like I'm just kind of blessed with it coming to me,
Yeah.
Like friends will just call me up and be like, hey man, do you want to sponsor this thing? I just need some bags. I'm like, yeah, totally. My willingness to give and be a part and contribute, makes me an easy target for people wanting to work with,
Yeah.
which is great for our brands. I think a lot of people, they play it so close to the chest because they're scared to get hurt,
Yep.
and yeah, I've definitely been burned. I'm not going to name any names, but I got burned in the 2018 or 2019 NRA doing a giveaway with I don't even want to say they're a firearms vendor. They're a firearms, like a custom company, and so, everybody gets burnt several times, and people will put on a good show and they'll tell you what you want to hear. Again, you got to use your common sense, but for the most part, I feel like quote unquote influencers in the industry, at least in our industry, are generally trying to do good.
Yeah.
We're a pretty self-policing industry, so if you do some dumb shit, like people are really going to get you
You
for
get
it.
gassed fast.
Yeah, dude, they're going to light you up like real hard. So, and again, there are those folks that are self-aware, so they would never purposely do something ridiculous. And then those folks that are just goofy and unaware, and they're like, the term I like to use in the people that we employ is edutainment, right? We want to build a community that's legitimate around our brand with our influencers. We want to make good products. We want to offer excellent customer service. And, that influencer, he's going to pay the price if we don't, right?
Yeah.
He's not going to want to work with us very long. So again, the symbiotic nature, of the business is to take care of them, and I don't think that some influencers necessarily understand that. It's like they're the only ones who have skin in the game.
Yeah.
And not really, man. I mean, we've got hundreds of employees that depend on this business to feed their families,
Right.
mine included. So we don't want anything bad to happen to it. If if you're reaching out to me, look at the state of the brand. Are we really professional? Or are you one of those brands that's just kind of like says whatever, does whatever, really risky? Those brands are out there in the gun industry, but they pay for it, in one way or another, in revenue or in reputation.
Yeah.
So
having been the guy that has, for lack of a better word, employed influencers, right? What to you, and I'm not sure how I want to ask this, but what to you makes a good influencer? How would you coach up an individual that wants to become an influencer maybe in the long run, right? And an influencer, whether that's just somebody that is the edutainment, like you said, maybe just the education side, the instructional side, whatever the case may be, what would you suggest to folks to maybe grow that skill set to reach out to someone like you?
I would say, one, because I'm not an influencer, not a public facing one anyway. And I would say you need to look to your peers, right? And see what sort of balance that they strike. Mike from Last Line of Defense and Talon Sai are always two of my favorite to mention. And they're Vertex's, top out of the four, top two. And John Lovell, a little more, risque in his, but they're not talking about that now. All three of them are very purpose driven, right? John is gun rights. He's very Christian. He's very straightforward. He doesn't like, certain types of behaviors from the administration or government, whoever it be. And he's all about that warrior poet thing, that he's like, protect the family, protect your unit. Where, Mike is very like family friendly, outdoor, love some toys. He's like, I want to have a good time, but I'm also pretty relaxed. Talon is kind of the same way. And not that you got to base your formula off of, what any one of these guys are doing, but it's like, look to your peers, quote unquote, and, see where the success lies. Yeah. It's not that hard. Now, it also is like going to Los Angeles and trying to be an actor. You know, it's like 1 out of every 1,000 people is going to get plucked, into the starship and, be able to make a living off this. And
Right.
part of the problem is that people do want to make a living off of it. Don't let it ruin you. Like you're trying so hard, you're spending money on guns and things. We've all heard this. You're buying shit to impress people you don't know. That's literally what's going on with some of these folks. And they really put a damper on their life by, acting like that. So
Be
I don't know
true.
if
Yeah.
that, answers the.
Yeah. I heard out of that one, don't buy shit to impress people you don't know. I think is probably a fair one. I think that's a fiscally responsible thing to say. But then be yourself and check your peers, right? Kind of figure out where it is that you want to go and start writing more or less your own song. That's kind of what I heard.
Yeah, being self-aware, right? Like, don't get on the internet and be cringy. Like, it's like, dude, like court jesters are exactly that. We laugh at them,
Yeah.
all these fools, dancing on TikTok. It's nonsense. It's absolutely ludicrous, dude. If you can split the balance where like, half of you is professional and the other half is like, hey man, I'm having some fun. Like we can tell.
Yeah.
We can tell that this is just for fun. But these folks that are, they're tryhards, they're never gonna have it, and then they end up wasting money, getting laughed at, wasting time, which is the big one, right? Because we can make more money, right? We can't get that time back.
Yeah.
Nope. You're only granted so much.
Okay. So of all of your life experience, all the people you've worked with, all the things that you've learned, this is my favorite question. What is the one thing that you wish you would have known going into all of this, or maybe feel that people should be aware of that you didn't know beforehand? It's my favorite question.
There is a chance if like friends of mine, they're like, man, I wish I could work in the gun industry. I'm like, dude, look, I am in the top percentile of lucky people walking the planet. That's facts, right?
Yeah.
And it wears on you, right? Constantly talking to people, having to deal with the internet, the backlash that happens on the internet, it wears on you. And I'm not going to say that I love the industry as much as I did, because I don't. I respect it. It's an animal. It's an absolute beast of an industry. And if you're not willing to sacrifice a part of yourself to get ahead, then don't get involved.
Yeah.
You don't want to end up coming in, loving guns, loving, the whole vibe that the gun industry brings. And then you find yourself a couple of years later full of regret and animosity and feeling, negatively towards it, because the gun industry, the people in it, the influencers, they didn't do any of this to you. You did it to yourself. Nobody grabbed you by the wrist and drug you in here. So you got to be prepared, because it's an industry full of people that are hard, right? They've been in the military, they've got hard life experience. There's mental health issues. There's and those things are everywhere. But yeah, we know that it is prevalent. That some companies, they're just kind of run like the military. It's a very knife hand directive kind of thing. And our companies aren't like that. I'm not speaking about our brands, but there are brands out there. And if you don't want to work in those type of situations, don't do it to yourself. Do something else and just love guns, or let guns be your hobby. You know what I mean? It's and same thing goes for influencers, man. You can observe. You don't necessarily, and you can privately partake. See, that's the problem is a lot of people, they've missed the point that like everything they do in life, it doesn't have to be a story. Like they can privately partake. And I'm pretty private. I mean, you follow me on Instagram, you see how little I post, maybe a couple of stories, maybe 5 stories an entire week. And it's usually something funny. I don't like to post negative things. If you want negative shit, you can get it somewhere else. There's plenty of negative out there, you can feast upon if you so desire. I just try, that's me, man. I just don't want to add to the problem.
Yeah.
I want to be a source of good in this industry, good information, good knowledge, good leadership. And I think with the critical eye on yourself, when back to that self-aware thing, it's, truth comes hard, man. And you look at yourself and I'm like, I'm a jackass. So the one thing that I, like I said, outside of what, being more self-aware, I wish I had had more like emotional intelligence. I wish I had come into this like less filled with rage and a more polished in as an employee, as a leader, because who knows, I would be farther. I spent a couple of years jackassing around before I got myself completely together. These are the mistakes of the young, but
that's a common thing, though. Yeah, you're not alone in that one.
We've all done that, man. I wish I knew then what I know now.
Yeah,
it's like, well, you do. The information is out there now. It's like, and hey, your parents always told you, but you don't want to listen to them. You want to hear it from somebody you respect,
right?
As a teenager, you're like, oh, my parents, whatever.
Yeah, they don't know. They don't know what I'm going through. Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, I am fresh out of questions. Is there anything that we glazed over, didn't talk about, or that you feel, is important to get after?
No, I think we've covered a lot, for the, how to get somewhere. I think it's, what the big takeaway is emotional intelligence, soft skill sets, figure out, if you want to be in a marketing department, figure out, how to use graphic design tools, how to run a camera, developing those soft skill sets, and then, developing, verbal skill sets. So like your ability to be likable and, to positively network with folks. I think those three things are key to success in any industry, not just firearms industry, but, they'll carry you.
Dan, once again, man, thank you for taking the time. I really enjoyed our conversation. I hope everybody listening, hope you all took some good information away, about soft skills and understanding maybe how to navigate kind of where do you want to go, and understanding that really, like Dan said, those soft skills really will carry you. So with that being said, today's episode, like I said earlier, is brought to you by Black Rifle Coffee. So be sure to use code Vanguard on Black Rifle's website. But otherwise, I hope you all have a great week, and we will catch you next time.